Pump up the jams on a suddenly not so casual free Friday. It is September 29, 2023. CFB Knowledge for College. The Shark and the Gun back for more. The energy is building. Big time stuff about to dominate live on Sharky Waters Nation, YouTube, the brand new channel, and of course, Twitter, now known as X. Guns Picks. A beautiful Friday it is. What's going on, brother?
I'm going to say two words. Conference matchups. Now we're into conference play. Now we have the data. Now we're going to get a little bit stronger, a little bit more aggressive, and it is going to be a remarkable fall as we get into all the conference plays. I am jazzed up for this week. Listen, it's not as strong as last week with all the matchups with all the ranked opponents, but this is going to be a profitable week, and hope you're going to be tailing all these plays. Let's get to it. I'm ready to go. Do it up.
As you mentioned, we are getting into conference season. Information is abundant, and we love that. Not waiting around. First play, 9 o'clock tonight. Corvallis, Washington, Pac-12 football, Razor Stadium, an absolute legendary top collaboration play. Oregon State at home where they function great. Utah, a lot to discuss. You call it Paper Tiger. I call it Fool's Gold. We'll both call it the first official of the broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, you're in Corvallis, you're in trouble if you're a Pac-12 opponent because they dominate. The Beavers dominate at home. Let me tell you why. Listen, where Utah's coming from, they're coming off a nice conference win versus UCLA. Kind of a lackluster win at best, 14-7 in that game at home, minus 24 net yards for the game. Look at where Oregon State. They're coming off a tough, heartbreaking loss versus Washington State in a revenge spot on the road, 38-35, going minus 88 net yards for the game. Now, Oregon State plays their best at home. If you actually look at the stats, they are that's where they get their W's. Plus 33 point differential at home this season. They have a plus 19 point differential at home in 2022, and they're 14-1 against the spread in the last 2 years at home. Now you got to look at Utah. They are notorious being a great home team, but flat on the road. Last season, they had a plus 96 net yard average on the road, but they gave up 69% pass completion rate to their opponents. Compare that to what they do at home. They actually hold their opponents to 50.3% at home as far as pass completion rate is concerned. This will be Utah's second road game of the season. Their first was a 20-13 win and they struggled at Baylor, only getting plus 38 net yards for the game. Now, Baylor, not a good team if you've actually seen them at all this season. Now you got to look at Utah. Still working with backup Nate Johnson as their starting quarterback. I know they're talking about bringing back Cameron Rising. That is debatable right now as we get closer to game time. We'll have to see if that happens. I heard they may be splitting possessions on this one. We'll see if that even happens. But I'm not really counting anything with Cameron Rising coming in with the rust factor in this one. I don't care who the quarterback is. I'm still going to be loving the Oregon State Beavers in this one. And, of course, you love it. You need it. It is the revenge spot on this one. Utah destroyed Oregon State last year, 42-16 as 10.5-point favorites. Now you see the line flipping to the other side with Oregon State as the favorite and Utah. Look at the trends on this one. 4-9 against the spread on the road in the last 2 years. 3-6 against the spread versus Oregon State in the last 9 meetings. You got an Oregon team off a floppy home win going on their second road test versus an Oregon State opponent off a road loss, playing a team with a massive revenge spot and a great home record. I told you, 14-1 against the spread. You just can't deny the trend on this one. I love the Beavers on this one. I think it's going to be riled up and jazzed up at night in Corvallis. Stand up, Beavers, as Shark would say. Give it to me here. I got it at -3. I don't care if it's -4, -5, -6, -7. Just take it, whatever the line is right now. This is going to be a double-digit victory for the Beavers. I got it as not a 1, not a 2, but 3 unit specials. And you know I always hit my 3 units. Let's go.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, line has shifted significantly. This is the quarterback situation. Cameron Rising has been questionable every single game this year. We're not entirely sure if he's going to play, 10 snaps, 40 snaps, or whatever. But one thing that Gunn said, we are not worried about it. We've seen margin attached to this, and it is indicative in this line. Just jumping off of what Guns said, we don't want to be too redundant with this, but I do have some points which I think are very noteworthy. Guns mentioned this, and I want to go back to what I said last night in the NFL broadcast. When you get to a point in football season, one thing you really need to look at is who's running too clean of a sheet and who really is fool's gold. Utah. Utah is 4-0 straight up. They are 3-1 ATS. But if you really go through the opponents in detail, we did back them correctly in their opener on August 31st at home against Florida. That was a revenge game. That was a strong line for Utah there, tonight being the opposite. But unimpressive versus a Florida team just purely not traveling well to mountain time, altitude, totally outside of their body. So that made sense for Utah to win that game. Week 2, as Guns mentioned, at Baylor, a Baylor team that took a loss to Texas State this year, one of their worst in program history in the last 25 years, 20-13. But Guns, you mentioned it, 14-0 Utah in the final 2 minutes of the game. The ultimate backdoor. Egregious. Week 3, Weber State, Damian Lillard, now with the Bucks. Weber State football, still a kind of a tight one, 31-7. FCS team, not indicative of anything there. And last week, another just absolute dud cover, 14-7 against UCLA, a game they were outgained 243-219. And as Guns mentioned, you go through the trends. Utah is 6-1 ATS, last 7 at home in conference. They are 2-3 road conference ATS, last 5. Crucial point, covers at Arizona State, fired Herm Edwards on the tarmac last year, basically. A disaster, and a 63-21 blowout of Colorado last year. Not indicative of this at all. Oregon State coming off a road loss last week, which we capped correctly to the over. This is where they bounce back great. They're 5-0-1 ATS, last 6 coming home off an outright loss on the road. DJ Uigalele and the boys will be turned up tonight. Upward movement in this program. Big time spot. All sharps we know. I want to shout this out. Sports Dogma, CT Bets, bunch of other dogs, Jay Creer, The Shark, The Gun. Collaboration official. An opportunity to dominate. 12 noon tomorrow, September 30th. Saturdays are for sending it. Jerry World. A rematch of last year. Texas A&M versus Arkansas. The Gun has the hat on, and it is the first official of Saturday's card.
Yeah, Death, Taxes, and A&M on this one. Get it up. Giga Maggies. I love this one perfectly versus Arkansas. Where's Arkansas coming from? The back-to-back losses, BYU and LSU. Not just a 30-point loss, but these hard-fought losses, right? They lost to LSU 34-31 on the road as a double-digit road dog. Did cover the spread on this one. They put up 509 yards of total offense to LSU. Minus 83 net yard average for the game. Now, A&M win over SEC opponent Auburn 27-10, dominating the game despite losing their quarterback. Connor Wegman, he's out for the season, but no fret. We'll be talking about the next quarterback up for this one. But they had plus 202 net yard average for that game. A&M, what do they got? Strong defense, right? They hold their opponents to 274 yards of total offense, 164 in the passing game, 53.6% pass completion rate to their opponents, and they get to the quarterback. There's a reason why Jimbo Fisher went out and recruited 5-star defensive linemen 2 years ago. Those guys are playing at their best today. They have a 13.4% sack rate. So they put pressure on the quarterback, and they will give KJ Jefferson some fit in this game. Now you look at the Arkansas offense; they're balanced, right? They have a 3.8 yards per carry on the ground, 237 yards per game passing with KJ Jefferson. He's actually doing quite well passing the ball, 70.4% pass completion rate, 9 touchdowns, 3 INTs. But this is the best defense that Arkansas has seen all season, and their O-line is suspect at best, giving up sacks and pressures in the pass rush at a 10% sack rate. This is a perfect spot for a strong defensive line going against a weak offensive line in Arkansas. Now, Arkansas has a decent pass rush themselves, 12.5% sack rate, but A&M has a good offensive line, only giving up 3.6% sack rate this season. These teams meet every year. They always meet in Jerry's World. it seems, almost every season. They've won 10 out of A&M has won 10 out of the last 11 straight up versus Arkansas, dating back to 2012. Last season, they were narrowly won that game 23-21 as 2-point favorites and are now 6.5-point favorites. And next year, a 4-point bump up for the Aggies on this one at a neutral site 1 year later. I'm high on A&M all season. I think this team could win the SEC West. I think they have to beat LSU and they have to beat Bama, two programs that I truly believe are on a down skid, where this team has a chip on their shoulder, winning 5 games last season in 2022. I know they lost Wegman, but they got Max Johnson. If you don't know who Max Johnson is, he was a starter for LSU and was very productive for them, getting them W's. He was productive for them for A&M last season before he got hurt. But now he's in the spot. The team rallied around him against Auburn, and he played exceptionally well. He actually was a bump up from Wegman in that game. So I think he's going to do the same here in this Arkansas spot. Neutral field, Jerry's World. He's been there before. He's gotten them the win there in Jerry's World before, and he's going to do it again. I got him at -6.5, -6, wherever the number is sitting right now. It's a 2.5 unit special for me. Get it done, SEC. Let them win the West, baby.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Obviously, Arkansas has burned us before this season. I think you're certainly onto something here. Jerry World, 12 o'clock. Staying at 12 o'clock, going smaller market football. Guns talks about this all the time. Sometimes the gold is in the crumbs. And we're looking at UConn, Pratt & Whitney Stadium here, East Hartford, Connecticut, at +4.5 official. A lot going on here. And if you go back to week 1, you guys might remember we did take UConn at home against NC State. And they didn't cover that game. And that was their only cover of the season, probably not coincidentally. This seems to be a trend developing with the UConn Huskies. This team is 0-4 straight up. They're 0-3 last 3 ATS. But if you go to the psychology of those losses, at Georgia State, you guys know how much we love Georgia State. Georgia State laid the hammer down. That was supposed to happen. Home game against Florida International, crucial point there. That was a home game that was a revenge game for the opponent, not UConn. And last week, a blowout against Duke, a Duke team that did beat Clemson. So class, revenge the other direction, and more class. Now you come back. This is their second home game of the year that is a revenge game dating back to last year. And you go back to last year and you go to Utah State. Utah State, in my opinion, is fool's gold at the highest order. We're going to talk about Coastal Carolina later on in this broadcast, but I think this is particularly noteworthy with Utah State as well. Go back only 2 seasons ago. Senior quarterback Logan Bonner and Utah State did finish the season 11-3 and beat Oregon State in a bowl game. That was the peak of this generation. They are 7-10 since, and they've been moving quarterbacks around a lot ever since Bonner graduated, and they are starting a true freshman quarterback tomorrow morning. Well, on his body time at least, McKay Hillstead. That will be 10 a.m. Mountain Time. This freshman quarterback has upside. He's very young. I believe he's only 18 or 19 years old, and he is 0-2 last 2 ATS. Final point on this game, and I'll throw it to the gun. This is a collaboration special. This is a line functionality spot. Last year, Utah State did lay a whopping 26.5 points at home. This is nowhere near that. It is -6. It is short. It is the exact same number functionality the NC State game had at UConn. Guns picks, collaboration, and an official.
Yeah, I mean, post shot is behind the window. Give you the fourth wall here. Is like we got off the show on Thursday and we were just talking about the college card, and we were just like, we can't find any plays. And as we were talking through the board and everything, we found 4 more plays. So sometimes you just have to talk things out with your partner on this one, and then you find you collaborate on this one. This one was the one that Shark convinced me on, and I started looking at it a little bit further. Shark just mentioned the UConn angle, right? But I want to talk about the Utah State angle about their games this season. So they had to play Iowa, right? They lost by 10 on the road, plus 45 net yards. So I was like, oh, that was interesting that they actually played really well with Iowa. But who do they have next? It was a perfect look ahead for Iowa. They had to play Iowa State in the next game. So they were working with a new offense as well, with a new quarterback in McNamara. A lot of pressure from the offensive side of the ball. Really didn't play well in that one. Very flat spot for Iowa. And then you had Idaho State. I'm going to throw that one out the window. They put up 70 points on that one. It was an FCS game. Nothing to look at that one. Just lackluster at best. And then you have Air Force, right? Air Force beat the monkey piss out of them, right? 39-21. But you have to understand the situation for Air Force. That was a double revenge game for them. They lost to them twice and Utah State was a 9-point dog and an 11-point dog in back-to-back years. So Air Force circled that game and had to take it out on them, right? And then you have JMU. They lost by 7 as 5.5-point home dogs, did cover the spread, but they were down 24 in the second quarter and fought back to get into that spot. So, they had to go and put their foot on the gas pedal to get back in that game, and maybe a little bit flat coming in here, going on the road, coming out that JMU loss, and then they have to go to UConn on the road. Now things have changed for Utah State overall. So if you look at the line correlation from year 1 to year 2, and I think Shark alluded to that, they were 26-point home favorites last season. And now you see the line at 4. Well, you look at the roster on this one. They lost their top running back, Calvin Tyler. He had almost 1,200 yards rushing last year in 2022. They lost their top receiver in Brian Cobbs. He almost had 1,000 yards receiving himself. And then you have the quarterback situation. Shark alluded to it. You have a true freshman starting in there. They actually have 2 quarterbacks. They have the quarterback from last year, and they have the freshman. So there's a battle in there. There's a lot of animosity in there. And as the phrase goes, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you really have none, don't you? So this is kind of an offense that is maybe trying to find themselves again, and they're going to find themselves against a UConn team that, quite frankly, is hungry for a win. They're playing at home. They want to go out there and show out to their opponents on this one. They want to show out to their fans and everybody that believed in them that got to the bowl game last season. I'm not saying they're going to win this game. I say they're going to keep it close. Actually, you know what? I am saying they're going to win this game because it's a 4-point spread. It's telling you a story. 26 points to 4 points based on the fact that they lost 2 big players, most of their defense from last year. I think that's egregious, in my opinion. It's telling a story here. Shark said it best when he did his breakdown, and I'm saying it again, just giving you the Utah angle on this one. This is why we're taking UConn in this one. I got it at plus 4.5. It's a 2-unit special for me. Let's go Huskies.
Yeah, and you make a great point. And we want to just briefly talk about the markets team. The markets team is telling an intelligent story here as well. This did open at 6, got steamed down to 4.5. And Guns mentioned we talked about this off the record, and we did. And one thing we said is when this is getting steamed up 1.5 points towards an 0-4 team, you know that's sharp action. Our good friend Joe Public is not pounding an 0-4 UConn Husky team. So you're not only getting behind us on a sharp take, but the entire market from any sort of analytical perspective is all over UConn here. Staying at noon, bigger football, SEC football, Kentucky at home, hosting the Florida Gators. Strong line, strong environment. This will be a tight, well-played game. Guns picks, a home team official.
Yeah, I'm just going to be sticking with Kentucky on this one. And like I said, when we talked about weeks ago, when I talked about Kentucky and Florida, I said Florida just owns Tennessee. I'm sorry, to Tennessee and Florida. I said Florida just owns Tennessee. There's no revenge on this one. This is what the pattern is. Kentucky fits that mold here with Florida. Let me tell you why. Florida coming off a big home win over their rival Tennessee with a flat effort. So they had this big win, then they had a flat effort versus Charlotte, 22-7. Won the net yardage battle plus 185 net yards, but really didn't crush this team at all. Really, really flat on this one. Maybe a look ahead for Kentucky, but we'll see come Saturday. Now you look at Kentucky coming into this game 4-0. They're undefeated, facing the toughest challenge of the season at home. This is their toughest game so far. They have a plus 22-point differential, plus 103 net yard average for the season. But, they face Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, and Vandy. So take that with a little bit of grain of salt. They're getting the job done, but they haven't faced anybody really of any note, okay? Now, Kentucky, what can they do? They can run the ball. They can pass the ball. They're very balanced. Devin Leary is their quarterback. He has 265 passing yards. Their O-line has played exceptionally well, allowing their running backs to 5.5 yards per carry this season, and they only have a 3.2 sack rate. So the offense is in good hands there. Devin Leary coming over from NC State. That dude can ball. And this is going to be the challenge of the season for him. So I think he's going to step up in this spot. Now you look at the Florida defense; they played well. I can give them that. 245 yards per game to their only giving up 205 yards per game to their opponents, but the competition has been very limited. You can take Utah. I know everybody says that playing Utah on the road is tough, but they didn't have Cameron Rising. They played McNeese State, they played Charlotte, and of course they played Tennessee, who they typically dominate, right? That's that in that game against Tennessee, they actually allowed more than their average, 387 total yards of offense given up to Tennessee, at 287 passing yards, and they did that at home in the Swamp. So I think this is going to be a good spot here. This is I'm getting to it. This is going to be a good spot here for Kentucky. Now, Kentucky has a great rush defense. They hold their opponents at 2.6 yards per carry so far this season, 4.2 yards per carry in 2012. So they're actually playing above, as improvement is concerned from the rush defense perspective, playing a lot better this season. They will want Graham Mertz to beat them, passing the ball. And if you have to rely on their rushing offense, it will be a problem for them. So basically, this is how you beat Florida. You stop the run and make Graham Mertz beat you with the passing game. And you've seen Graham Mertz at Wisconsin. You know he's susceptible to make mistakes eventually, especially when he has to make more throws than he has to. Kentucky has won the last two meetings straight up as 7.5 and 6-point dogs from 2021 and 2022, and now they're favored in this spot, -1 and -2. I've seen multiple lines on this one. Kentucky covered the last 6 meetings versus Florida as well. Basically, just like Florida with Tennessee, Kentucky owns Florida in the past few seasons, and Florida is still riding high off that win versus Tennessee. They were flat versus Charlotte. I think they're going to be in a position where the same pattern happens here. They're going to Kentucky. Stoops is going to have those guys revved up for their most important game of the season. I'm going to be taking the favorite on this one, an unranked favorite versus a ranked dog. I love taking the favorite unranked team every single time. Give me Kentucky on this one, -1, 2-unit special.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's sharp stuff. Absolutely. I think historically, as you mentioned, teams that are unranked, favored over ranked, it's telling you a story without question. The discrepancy point between the polls and the books, leaning towards books, knowing more than the polls ultimately. And a generational buy low, our next collaboration play, 3:30 p.m., Big Ten football, Nebraska and Matt Rule, first Big Ten home game. It doesn't get any bigger than this against number 2 in the country, Jim Harbaugh, and the Michigan Wolverines. We are on this officially at +17.5, 1 unit. And you really start to open up this cap. You go back to week 1. Interestingly enough, we did have them correctly on the road as a dog in their only Big Ten game. They did lose the game, but they did cover the spread, 13-10. And you go to those first 2 games, week 2 at Colorado. Guns had a nice diatribe about Colorado last week before Oregon obliterated them and brought them back to normalcy. But when they were still hovering in the zone of insanity, they did beat Nebraska 36-14. But crucial point, transfer quarterback Jeff Sims, great athlete, not doing the job. 8 turnovers in the first 2 weeks. Basically handed those 2 games to those 2 opponents. Well, you get a quarterback switch. Heinrich Harburg. This is not men's figure skating the Olympics. This is quarterbacking of Big Ten football. However, this guy has been very efficient in the last 2 games. And I think when you look at Michigan, just as importantly as it is to look at Nebraska, Michigan, in my opinion, is kind of getting away with it a little bit. 4-0, all games played at home. This is their first road game. And notice, no out-of-conference road games. So for whatever reason, Harbaugh and the boys set up the schedule to stay at home for a full month and then open up at Nebraska. And the opponents at home, again, not impressive. Eastern Carolina having one of their worst seasons in a long time, 30-3. UNLV, a team that let us down last week against UTEP, blowout 35-7, not indicative of much. Bowling Green out of the MAC, 31-6. And Rutgers, really lackluster Big Ten opener last week, 31-7. This is not indicative of the quality you're going to see here with Harburg at quarterback. And you go through this, as Guns was mentioning, certain teams own certain teams. I like to buy the reversal, and I think this is where it comes. This is a 3x revenge game. Nebraska has lost 3 straight to Michigan, but I think the home to road gap is very important here. At the Big House, 2 out of the last 3 seasons, plus 77 home margin, 56-10 and 34-3 last year. Game played on October 9th, 2021 in Nebraska. Totally different story. 32-29. This is where Nebraska is going to play their best ball. They are 1-0 in conference play as a dog already. They're coming off a lackluster non-cover last week against La Tech. Michigan is playing with fire here, starting with 4 straight at home. Maybe not ready for this moment, and the line is significantly short. Minus 28 last year, steamed up by the market to 30.5. Hook cover for Michigan. This drops to 18. This is short by 7 points. And crucial point, market steam this year on Nebraska. Line functionality's on it. Market steam is on it. We are on it. And I'm throwing it to the gun for more comments.
Forgive me, Nebraska. I just can't quit you. I can't quit you. And Shark alluded to it. I had a diatribe about Nebraska over Colorado. You forgot to mention that game was very, very close for a long time. But what took them out of the game? Turnovers. And they had to make a change. And they put in, I don't know, what do you call him? The German slinger. We got to come up with a nickname for this guy. But let's talk about this game here for a second. Michigan coming off 4-game home stretch, like Shark said. ECU, UNLV, Bowling Green, and Rutgers. I mean, come on. No world beaters there. Very boring schedule. They held all their opponents to 7 points or less with a plus 174 net yard average. I do believe that Harbaugh, he's been out for 4 games. This is his first game back, and now he's got to do it on the road. So that's going to be a little bit of a interesting dynamic there, having your coach back. But you got to look at Nebraska coming off back-to-back home wins after 2 road losses to Colorado and Minnesota. Minnesota was a very tight one. At home, they have a plus 19 point differential, plus 157 net yard average, but they did that versus Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech. You know how bad those 2 teams are. But the turnover issues been a struggle for them, right? The first 2 games were terrible. They completely got obliterated in the turnover ratio. So they took Jeff Sims and they benched him. They put in Harburg, who isn't a strong passer, but guess how many interceptions he has this year? 0. And you actually look at those 2 starts, he's actually led the team in rushing. He has 6.5 yards per carry on the ground, and he has 2 rushing touchdowns. So he's one of those guys that will create plays with his feet, not make mistakes, and matriculate the ball down the field productively, which I think he'll be able to do against this Michigan team. Now, Michigan, what are they? Run first offense, right? 5 yards per carry on the ground this season so far. Nebraska, what are they good at? Their defense is great against the run. You saw it versus Colorado. You've seen it virtually in every single game. They actually hold their opponents to 1.8 yards per carry this season. I mean, granted, the competition's been very weak, and they haven't really faced a strong rushing team. Maybe you can consider Northern Illinois that, but I think they're going to be able to hold this Michigan team to below their season average in rushing. Now you got to look at Nebraska. They've lost the last 3 matchups straight up versus Michigan and pushed ATS in the last 2 meetings. Last season, Michigan won 34-3 at home as a 31-point favorite. This season, the line is 17, as Shark just mentioned earlier in his breakdown, as an away favorite. So there's line correlation there, right? Now you have Michigan running through their competition without any challenges, basically just going through the motions, not having their coach there. But they're getting the job done. But you have Nebraska that's just ready to compete, probably got, getting their butt whipped to Colorado might have set them right in the right position. And you get them at home. And I think this is going to be a very tight game here, probably going to give Michigan a scare, but you're getting 17.5 here. I think this is like a, 8 to 10 point game to me, similar to a lot of these spots when Michigan has to travel to Nebraska historically. So I'm going to be taking Nebraska here with the Shark in a full collab. 17.5, 2-unit special.
Yeah, I mean, say no more on that game. Top spot, Big Ten football. Let's dominate. Segueing back to small market football, I never thought I'd see a day where I'm backing both UConn and UMass. But here we are on a suddenly not so casual free Friday. Sharky Waters Nation, 9 Words of Lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. UMass on the money line, minus 122. Official. This game has a lot of great stuff, Guns. And I started going through it, and my eyes lit up. And you look at UMass. UMass comes in here in the same position that UConn does on a 4-game losing streak. However, UMass has been more effective. They are 2-3 ATS. Very impressive win in the opener at New Mexico State. They are 0-2 at home ATS, but when you go through this is where I think this team really is trending towards an outright victory. They have lost 6 straight at home. Last year, slightly less competitive, but let's zoom in on this year. September 9th against Miami of Ohio, they did take a 41-28 loss on a +7, so a non-cover. But I think a crucial point on that, it was actually a 31-28 game in the fourth quarter, and they just couldn't hang on. Come back the next week at Eastern Michigan. I was talking about home games, but I do want to mention this game on the road at Eastern Michigan in terms of their upward movement towards an outright win. The game at Eastern Michigan, it was September 16th. They did take a 19-17 loss. However, they outgained EMU 464-371, and EMU had a 50-yard touchdown pass to win that game at 120 in the fourth quarter. UMass did cover the spread. Come back to last week, second home game of the year against University of New Mexico. Took another heartbreaking loss, this time in overtime, 34-31. And again, outgained New Mexico 495-328. That's 959 yards in their last 2 games. This is not UMass of yesteryear. This offense has some pop with a new quarterback. And you go back to last week, we took a loss betting against Arkansas State. But one thing that I've said about Arkansas State all year, they do not defend. In their last 4 games, they have given up 1,791 yards against. So when you look at UMass really stacking up yards, close to 500 yards per game in their last 2 games, now they get an even worse defense coming across to Amherst, Massachusetts. And I think even better, Arkansas State coming in here off back-to-back outright wins, which is just so unsustainable for them. One of them against FCS Stony Brook, which of course makes sense. Last week, a win against Southern Miss, outgained in the game. Couple small window plays determine that. This really should come the other direction. UMass did take a loss at Arkansas State last year, so we are matchup data abundant, which is important. Very similar stuff to the UConn game against Utah State. A tight cover on the road for UMass, almost a win, 35-33. Now the line moving heavily down. Last year at home, Arkansas State was minus 17.5. It was steamed down by the market to 17, indicating a UMass cover. The market got it right. This opened at Arkansas State -1 on the road, incredibly short. Should be a double-digit line based on historical standards. Same market steam. This year even stronger. This is steamed all the way across to UMass -2. I'm on the money line at -122. That is Park Sportsbook in Philadelphia. And, of course, that is -130 in most of the big market books. I wouldn't talk you off the spread either. This is a great spot. This is where this team should and will get off the schneid at home. Numbers and narratives, 3:30 p.m., Amherst, Massachusetts. UMass on the money line, -122. 4 o'clock SEC football. Guns picks. Vanderbilt Commodores hosting Missouri. You have a lot of information here. You love Missouri. You know when to buy and you know when to sell. This is a sell spot on Week 5 Saturday.
Before I get into it, I want to make sure I shout out the chat on this one. John Martineau, football guy, always joining our content. Love you, dude. Gerard Smith joining us. Keith Landry, my guy. Chad Moody, please get into the chat. Tell me what you're on today or tomorrow and share it with us so I can share it with the fellas in the group. But I want to consider myself the Missouri Tiger Whisperer, okay? I am trying to compel it to the outcome of this game will predicate what's going to be the outcome of next week. But let's break this game down here. Look at where Missouri's coming from. 4-0, coming into this game straight up, back-to-back close games, winning at Kansas State in dramatic fashion as a home dog. And then they went into neutral field in St. Louis and beat Memphis. They have a plus 110 net yard average so far this season with a plus 10-point differential. Now, Vandy's 0-5 against the spread, okay? I know where they're coming from. They're coming off their third straight loss to Kentucky last week, 45-28. It's 13.5-point dogs. They were only minus 38 net yards for that game despite losing by 17. So they're staying, from a yardage perspective, they're staying with strong competition. However, the points are not getting on the board. But I think versus this rival that they know very well, this game will be close. Now, what's Missouri's success is more predicated on the fact that all of their games have been relatively at home, except for that neutral site game versus Memphis. Missouri on the road historically has not been great. They are 1-6 against the spread as an away favorite in the last season. They had a minus 13-point differential with a minus 24 net yard average on the road. In comparison to their performance at home, plus 11-point differential, plus 75 net yard average at home last season. This season, right on the number as far as their home splits. Plus 10-point differential, plus 99 net yard average in 2023. So they're really staying within the pattern of how this team plays. Now, Vandy is 2-3 straight up this season. They have a plus 1-point differential, plus 3 net yard average so far this season at home. They are plus 8-point differential, plus 17 net yard average. So this is a team that plays better at home than they do on the road. These two teams meet every year. Last season, Missouri won this game 17-14 as 14-point home favorites. And in 2020 and in 2021, the last time they played, Missouri won 37-28 as 16.5-point road favorites. So the line's kind of staying right around where it was in most of these matchups. So in other words, Vandy competes with Missouri more than they don't. They're 4-1 against the spread in the last 5 meetings versus Missouri. Now, Missouri, what do they have next week? Can anybody tell me? Anybody? Bueller? A little team known as LSU, the Tigers, arguably the perennial favorite to win the SEC West. They get them at home next week. So there's going to be a look-ahead spot for this Missouri team. This Missouri team is just playing way too hot, above their pay grade. They haven't played a true road game this season. This is the first one. They're going against a team that they normally play very close with. I'm not saying Missouri's going to lose this game. I just think this is going to be a barn burner and a scare for them. And if it is, we're going to be probably taking, depending on what the line is, we may be riding Missouri next week at home versus LSU. And I love that situation. I love that spot. I hope it happens. But I'm going to be taking Vandy here. Plus 14. I get 14 points. Beautiful. 2.5 unit special.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, big game next week against LSU. Shifting to 7 o'clock, primetime football, Sun Belt Conference. We love it, and we love to dominate. We're taking Georgia Southern at home in Statesboro, Georgia, that is, minus 6.5 official. I mentioned it when I talked about Utah State. We're going to talk about the same idea with Coastal Carolina. This is a team that really did peak over the last few seasons. Go back to the pandemic season in 2020. The Sun Belt actually played a full calendar, and they did play 11 games that year, and they went 11-0 in the regular season. They did have a bowl loss. 2021, it continued. 11-2 overall and a bowl win. That is 22-2 over 24 ball games for a team that had never shown any success even remotely comparable to that. And it was largely because of Grayson McCall and a young group getting their act together. Well, guess what, guys? I think the show is over. Since that essential 2.5 season heater, which did culminate last season in the back end of 2022, they started last year 9-1, and they finished 0-3. They are 2-5 in their last 7 ball games. And I don't think this is going anywhere but south. You saw it last week, the gun with an official, a blowout win by Georgia State on the road at Coastal. And you go through Coastal this year, truly unimpressive. 14-point loss at UCLA. Home loss, as we just mentioned, to Georgia State. Their wins have come at home against FBS newcomer Jacksonville State and a blowout against Duquesne. We talked about this before. Duquesne is known for basketball, not football. So those 2 wins are not really indicative of anything. And you go to Georgia Southern. We know Georgia State is a bye team. Georgia Southern is also a bye team. And the line is indicating immense strength here. If you go to one specific environment, we did buy Georgia Southern at home on September 9th against UAB. And on that particular day, it was week 2 on this show. I said this is a great line in a revenge game from last year. This is the same thing. Go back to last year. UAB had hammered them on the road, 35-21. UAB was minus 11.5, and it came all the way over to Georgia Southern -7. That was an 18.5-point gap. And they did hammer them 49-35. Crucial point, tons of points. This week's total was 66.5. They're telling you a very, very similar story. Go back to last year at Coastal. This is conference football. 34-30 Coastal. Crucial point line -10 on the road here, +3.5. That's a 13.5-point gap. And Coastal did win that game in very, very fortunate circumstances. A 24-yard touchdown run with 38 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. Georgia Southern probably should have won that game last year, Guns, on the road at +10. They certainly will show up here in a revenge game. I mentioned it with Michigan, 3 times revenge game. This is a 3x revenge game. They've lost all 3 times in this renaissance for Grayson McCall, which we suspect is over. Top play from the Shark, -6.5, and alignment from the gun.
Yeah, the weird thing about this season, and it kind of predicates from last season. I mean, they lost their coach Chadwell. He goes and jumps ship, goes to Liberty. And Grayson McCall actually put himself in the transfer portal, and then all of a sudden he goes, "You know what? I'm just kidding. I'm going to come back for this one." I believe he played in that bowl game too and got him that win. But let's talk about this game here for a second here. Georgia South back-to-back road stretch versus non-conference opponents. Ball State 40-3. Dominate the net yard battle in their last game, plus 33 net yards. Georgia Southern, when you look at this team, they played their best ball at home. In 2022, they had a +8 point differential and currently have a +24 point differential at home this season. So this team is actually improving. Granted, the competition has been a little bit weak. We'll see at the end of the season where the numbers lie. Georgia Southern can run the ball. They have a 4.9 yards per carry this season, but their strength is the passing game. David Brin actually passing really well this season, 72.5% pass completion rate, 7.1 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns, 7 INTs. INTs a little bit of a problem there, but no fret. They can still run the ball. Now you got to look at what Coastal Carolina. I mean, they play well at home. I can give you that. Granted, they didn't play well last week when we took Georgia State, but they do play well at home. However, road, different story. -8 point differential and -57 net yard average on the road in 2022, and they are -14 point differential, -72 net yard average in 2023 on the road so far this season. Coastal Carolina, like Shark said, they've won the last 3 matchups. Georgia Southern versus Georgia Southern, but in the last game, like Shark talked about, they lost 34-30, where Coastal Carolina was a 10-point favorite. And now you see the line swing in the other direction. Georgia Southern is now the favorite here at home. Georgia Southern 2-0 against the spread as a home favorite, and they're 19-11 against the spread in the last 10 years as a home favorite. Not a lot of opportunities that they've ever been a home favorite, and you see them against what is considered the public perception is Coastal Carolina is still that dog. They ain't that dog anymore. It's actually Georgia Southern and Georgia State in that conference that are the new dogs that are going to be taken over, in my opinion, and maybe even the Sharks. So you have the revenge factor, significant line shift from year 1 to year 2, and the teams play their best at home versus away splits. It's the perfect spot to take Georgia Southern. We love it. I think Georgia Southern blows them out of the water, and we got them here at -6.5. It's a 2.5 unit special for me.
Yeah, no, what I was talking about, I don't disagree. I think they're going to have points early and often here. As I mentioned in the game corollary against UAB, 49 points, 49-35. And taking a breath, that is the show on this beautiful Friday night, Friday, September 29th, 2023. 47 minutes in the books. Tons of top plays. Let's drop them in the official context as we close. Oregon State -3.5, 4.5 now. Collaboration play with the gun. Pac-12 football kickoff in about 1 hour. Stand up, Corvallis. Let's dominate. 12 o'clock tomorrow, UConn +4.5 at home. Another collaboration play. Nebraska, 3x revenge. Big time spot tomorrow afternoon, +17.5. UMass to get off the home schneid, -122 on the money line. And as Guns and I just discussed, Georgia Southern -6.5. The gun with additional plays. Texas A&M -6.5 at Jerry World at noon. Kentucky at noon. SEC football -1 and more SEC football at 4 o'clock. Vanderbilt +14. That is 8 official plays combined. That is 4 collaboration plays. We love to collaborate because we know the information is lining up in the highest level. It is Vegas algorithmic line functionality, and it is psychological schedule scaling of the zigzag and up and down of college football teams week to week, road, home, as they cluster and as teams bounce back and move around. We appreciate you guys immensely in the chat. We're trying to build this. It is the very beginning. It is Sharky Waters Nation on YouTube. It is the Shark and the Gun. Fridays are for freedom. Sending you guys all the best vibes. Guns Picks, a pleasure as always. A fire show. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Listen, all you beautiful bastards in the chat, all you beautiful bastards watching us live, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you know every time we go live. Listen, I'm going to be on 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow with Saturday mornings with Guns. Bring your coffee, bring your bevies, bring your donuts, bring your croissants. I don't care. We just want to hang out. I want to talk to you guys about the plays and answer your questions. I'm going to have a special guest in there. Brian Power from Wager Talk is going to be joining me, and he is a very intelligent and knows college football better than anybody I know, excluding the 2 people you're watching right now. But and then join us Sunday as well for the NFL talk. And that's it for the show. Let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the board. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang.